A tech billionaire offered me his entire empire if I could translate a language carved onto a black box so ancient it predated human civilization. The helicopter ride was the most ostentatious part of the summons. It wasn't the black car that appeared outside my cramped university office, or the stoic driver who knew my name without asking. It was the ascent, lifting me from my world of dusty archives and underfunded research grants into the sterile, glass and steel stratosphere of Julian Croft. The city sprawled below, a map of lives I'd never touch, as we aimed for the glittering fang of Croft Tower. His private helipad, of course. The air up here was thin and tasted of money. I clutched the worn leather strap of my satchel, the only piece of my world I'd brought into his. Inside were my notes, my custom-lensed magnifiers, and a half-eaten protein bar. I felt like a field mouse being airlifted into an eagle's nest. The summons had been cryptic. Mr. Croft requests your expertise on a matter of unique linguistic significance. Your discretion is paramount. Your compensation will be sufficient. Sufficient. A word only used by people for whom money has lost all meaning. His office was less an office and more a monument to his own ego. It occupied the entire top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic God's-eye view of the world he'd conquered. The furniture was sparse, angular, and looked punishingly uncomfortable. And there he was, standing not behind a desk, but in the center of the vast space, silhouetted against the afternoon sun. Julian Croft, the tech wunderkind, the market disruptor, the man whose face was plastered on every business magazine, always with the same predatory smirk. He turned as I was escorted in. The smirk was there in person, too. It was a weapon. "Dr. Eris Thorne," he said, his voice a smooth, practiced baritone. He didn't offer a hand. "I'm told you're the best." "The best at what, exactly, Mr. Croft?" The email was concise. I kept my own voice level. Men like Croft fed on intimidation. Starving them was the only defense. Ancient, untranslated, and dead languages. A particularly useless field of study, I always thought, he mused, walking a slow circle around me, inspecting me like a piece of art he was considering buying. A hobby for academics who can't handle the real world. And yet, here we are. I felt the familiar flush of anger. My hobby is the study of entire civilizations, Mr. Croft. The foundation of all human communication. Yes, yes, very noble. He waved a dismissive hand. But I'm not interested in the foundation. I'm interested in the final word. He stopped in front of a stark white pedestal in the middle of the room. On it, under a focused spotlight, sat a small black box. It wasn't just black. It was a light-devouring obsidian, so dark it seemed to punch a hole in reality. It was a perfect cube, maybe 5 inches on each side, and every single surface, including the edges, was covered in a script I had never seen before. I couldn't help but step closer. The air around the box felt cold. The symbols were impossibly intricate, a fusion of cuneiform wedges, serpentine curves, and geometric shapes that seemed to defy logical progression. They were carved with a precision that modern tools would struggle to replicate. It was recovered from a geological stratum believed to be over 50,000 years old, Croft said, his eyes gleaming with a possessive fire. Predates any known form of written language. Sumerian, Egyptian hieroglyphs. They're children's crayon drawings compared to this. I felt a dizzying pull, the academic thrill of a lifetime. This was it. The artifact that could rewrite history. Who has seen this? The best cryptographers from the NSA, the most renowned linguists from Oxford and Yale. A team of quantum physicists who thought it might be a data storage device from elsewhere. He gestured vaguely at the sky. They all failed. For 5 years, they've all failed. They say it's not a language. They say it's decorative. They're fools. He turned to me, his smirk gone, replaced by an intensity that was far more unnerving. They see it as a problem. I see it as the ultimate lock. And every lock has a key. I've read your dissertation on pre-Indo-European glottal shifts. You see patterns where others see chaos. You're my last resort. I reached out, my fingers hovering just over the box's surface, a professional reflex. May I? He nodded. The moment my skin made contact with the obsidian, a strange, faint vibration hummed through me, a low thrum that felt less like a sound and more like a memory. I pulled out my magnifiers. Up close, the symbols were even more maddening. They seemed to shift in my peripheral vision, to rearrange themselves when I focused on a single character. It wasn't a language, at least not a two-dimensional one. "What's inside?" I murmured, lost in the script. "I don't know," Croft said, his voice low and hungry. "But the scans show it's hollow, and whatever is in there is complex. This box, this puzzle, has been my singular obsession. It is the only thing my money, my power, and my influence cannot conquer. So I'm changing the rules of the game." He stepped up beside me, his gaze fixed on my face. "Here is my offer, Dr. Thorne. Forget compensation. Forget a finder's fee. You are looking at my life's work, my legacy." He gestured grandly, encompassing not just the office, but the entire city, glittering below us. "Solve this. Open the box, and you get everything." I blinked, turning from the artifact to him. Everything. This building. My controlling shares in Croft Industries. My private jet. My art collection. My offshore accounts. All of it. An empire worth over $100 billion. I will sign a legally binding contract, drafted by the best lawyers on the planet. You open that box, and my life's work becomes yours. Fail, and you walk away with nothing but a good story. He smiled that chilling smile again. "So the question is, Dr. Thorne, are you as smart as you think you are?" It was the most absurd, most arrogant, most insane proposition I had ever heard. It was a gamble of godlike proportions. I stared at the box, at the impossible, shifting script. My mind raced, connecting faint, esoteric theories, things I'd been ridiculed for, even suggesting in academic circles. The way the lines intersected, the recursive nature of the patterns. It wasn't just writing. It was a set of instructions. It was a blueprint. And suddenly, a sliver of understanding, cold and terrifying, pierced through the fog. I looked up from the box and met his smug, expectant gaze. "You've had this all wrong," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Your cryptographers, your linguists, they were trying to read a message." "And what is it then?" he prompted, leaning in, the scent of victory already on him. I took a shaky breath, the cold from the obsidian seeming to seep into my bones. "This isn't a message, Mr. Croft. It's a schematic. It's not meant to be read. It's meant to be built. And the symbols, they aren't words. They're warnings." Croft's condescending smirk returned, fuller this time, laced with disappointment. "Warnings? Dr. Thorne, please, spare me the academic theatrics. Are you trying to scare me into a higher fee? I assure you my offer is final, and frankly, quite generous for a ghost story." "This isn't a story," I snapped, my focus entirely on the impossible object before me. I ran a gloved finger along a sequence of characters. "Look, this symbol here, it's repeated 17 times, but each time it's bracketed by a different set of modifiers. In a written language that signifies context, grammar. But here the modifiers aren't grammatical. They're operational. This one," I pointed, "looks like a limiter. This one, a directional vector. This one, it looks almost like a depiction of thermal runaway. You're not supposed to read this left to right. You're supposed to understand it as a three-dimensional system. A machine." He was silent for a moment, the smirk finally faltering. "A 50,000-year-old machine. Why not? Did you think early humans just sat in caves drawing stick figures? Maybe some of them were engineers." I pulled out a portable spectroscope from my satchel and ran a quick scan. The readings were nonsensical, the material absorbing all wavelengths with perfect efficiency. They weren't building it with iron and steam, Mr. Croft. The materials, the power source, they would be things we have no context for. This schematic is the context. "So, build it," he challenged, his voice regaining its sharp, commanding edge. He strode over to a sleek, minimalist desk and pressed a hidden button. A panel on the wall slid open, revealing a massive smart screen. "You have the full resources of Croft Industries at your disposal. Tell my engineers what to do." "What do we build? A key? A generator?" I shook my head, frustration mounting. "You're still thinking like a modern man. You don't build it out there, I said, gesturing to the world outside the window. You build it in here. I tapped my temple. It's a conceptual machine. The language isn't just descriptive, it's formative. I believe the very act of understanding and processing the instructions in the correct sequence is what triggers the mechanism. You're saying I have to think the box open. The incredulity in his voice was thick enough to choke on. Not just think, it's more complex than that. My research deals with proto-languages, the very first sounds that formed meaning. I believe the shapes of these symbols don't just represent concepts, they represent specific phonetic components, sounds that our vocal cords are no longer evolved to produce easily. It's a key made of language, a password spoken in a tongue that died before humanity even learned to write. A flicker of genuine fascination finally broke through his arrogant facade. Speak it then. Say the magic words. If I get it wrong, I could be telling it to self-destruct instead of open, I countered. These warnings I mentioned, they are everywhere. They are the linguistic equivalent of a skull and crossbones, and they are guarding almost every sequence, except for one. For the next several hours, the world outside ceased to exist. There was only me, the silent black cube, and the ghost of a language that was never meant for human eyes. Croft had food and water brought in, but he never left. He sat in one of his brutalist chairs, watching me with an unnerving, predatory stillness. I mapped the symbols, cross-referencing their components, breaking them down into what I theorized were root phonemes. It was like disassembling a bomb made of ideas. My head throbbed, and my notes became a chaotic sprawl of diagrams and unfamiliar phonetic notations. The one sequence without a warning was deceptively simple. Just 3 symbols, tucked away near a corner, almost like a maker's mark or an ignition switch. It was the only logical place to start. If I was wrong, it would do nothing. If I was right, I stood before the pedestal, my heart hammering against my ribs. The $100 billion prize felt distant and trivial now. I was standing on the edge of a discovery that could shatter our understanding of the past, or it could just be a very old, very expensive paperweight. Well, Croft's voice cut through the silence. We're waiting. I took a deep breath, focusing on the 3 symbols. I tried to shape my mouth, my throat, my very breath into the forms I saw carved in the obsidian. It felt unnatural, like trying to bend my tongue in a direction it wasn't designed for. The first sound was a low, guttural click from the back of the throat. The second was a sharp, sibilant hiss that vibrated against my teeth. The third was the hardest, a multi-tonal hum that required me to use my soft palate in a way I never had before. I spoke them in sequence. A sound left my lips that was utterly alien, a discordant and ancient syllable that hung in the sterile air of the office for a bare second. For a moment, nothing happened. Croft let out a short, derisive scoff. "Is that... He was cut off by a sharp crack, like ice splitting under pressure. It didn't come from the box. It came from the air, around the box. I stared, breathless, as a hairline fracture of pure white light appeared on the obsidian cube's seamless surface. Then another and another, branching out from the corner where the sequence was carved. The symbols themselves began to glow with a faint, cold, blue luminescence, pulsing in time with my own frantic heartbeat. The box wasn't just opening. It was waking up. The light pouring from the cracks intensified, casting sharp, alien shadows across the room. The low thrumming I had felt upon first touching the box was now an audible hum, a resonant frequency that vibrated in my teeth and bones. It wasn't a mechanical sound. It was pure, like the ringing of a crystal glass the size of a mountain. Croft was on his feet now, his arrogance replaced by a raw, naked avarice. He took a step forward, reaching for it, but I threw out an arm to stop him. "Don't touch it!" My voice was sharper than I intended. "We have no idea what's happening." "What's happening is that you're winning, Dr. Thorne," he hissed, his eyes locked on the glowing artifact. "This is it. This is everything." The obsidian cube didn't fold open or slide apart. It deconstructed. The perfect seamless surfaces began to drift apart, not as 6 sides of a box, but as thousands of impossibly thin slivers of black material. They floated in the air, held in a perfect spherical formation by some unseen force, the blue light of the symbols now illuminating the space between them. In the center, where the solid core of the box should have been, there was nothing. No ancient scroll, no gleaming crystal, no alien technology. Just a shimmering distortion in the air, a small, fist-sized anomaly that bent the light of the room around it like a heat haze on asphalt. "Is that it?" Croft sounded utterly deflated. "An empty box? Some kind of cheap parlor trick?" "It's not empty," I whispered, my academic curiosity overriding any sense of fear. "Look at the light. It's a gravitational lens. It's so dense it's bending space-time. That's not nothing. That's everything." As I spoke, the shimmering anomaly pulsed. The humming sound deepened, and from the distortion, a single mote of light emerged. It drifted out slowly, suspended in the air, before gently floating down to rest on the surface of the pedestal. It looked like a seed, no bigger than my thumbnail, forged from solid, captured starlight. It pulsed with a soft internal white light, warm and inviting. Croft, his disappointment forgotten, moved with the speed of a predator. He shoved past me and snatched the seed from the pedestal. "Mine," he breathed, a triumphant, almost feral grin spreading across his face. The instant his skin made contact with the seed, two things happened simultaneously. First, the thousands of floating obsidian slivers that had formed the box instantly lost their cohesion. They didn't fall to the floor. They simply vanished. One moment they were there, a cloud of glowing symbols, and the next they were gone, leaving only the empty pedestal. The humming stopped, plunging the room into a deafening silence. Second, the light from the seed in Croft's hand exploded outwards. It wasn't a violent explosion, but a wave of pure information, of raw knowledge that washed over me. It wasn't visual or auditory, it was conceptual. In a silent, timeless instant, my mind was flooded with the entire language of the box. I didn't just understand it, I knew it, as if I had been born speaking it. I saw the civilization that created it, beings of energy and thought who viewed the physical universe as a temporary medium. I saw them engineer stars, weave the fabric of reality, and seed barren worlds with the potential for life. And I saw why they created the box. It wasn't a relic or a tool. It was a test, a filter, and I understood the warnings. They weren't warnings against destroying the box. They were warnings against what was inside. The seed wasn't a key or a prize. It was a catalyst. It rewrote the user. It amplified a single dominant trait within the host, shaping their reality around that trait until it was all that existed. For a species that had evolved beyond base emotions like greed or fear, it would be a tool for creation. For a human. I looked at Julian Croft. His face was alight with a terrifying, ecstatic glow. The seed was sinking into his palm, not burning him, but merging with his flesh. The light spreading up his arm in a network of incandescent veins. "I can see it," he whispered, his eyes wide and unfocused, looking at something beyond the walls of his office. "The market trends, the flow of capital. It's not a system. It's a living thing. It's a language, and I can speak it." He clenched his fist, and the smart screen on the wall flickered to life. It wasn't showing the news or stock tickers. It was showing pure, raw data streams, global financial transactions moving in real time, quadrillions of bytes a second. But now they had a pattern, a rhythm. Croft's hand twitched, and on the screen the data shifted. The Tokyo Exchange faltered. European bonds surged. He wasn't predicting the market. He was conducting it like a symphony orchestra. "You said I'd get everything," he said, turning his glowing eyes to me. The man I had met hours ago was gone, replaced by a being of pure, unadulterated avarice. Why settle for your promise? Why settle for just my own empire, when I can have them all? His gaze fell upon me, and it was not the gaze of a man looking at another person. It was the gaze of a god looking at an irrelevance, the contract, the deal, his entire world before this moment. It was all dust. He had the ultimate power, and he had no intention of sharing it. He smiled, a rictus of terrifying joy. "Thank you for your services, Dr. Thorne. They are no longer required." He lifted his glowing hand, not towards the screen, but towards me. I felt a sudden crushing pressure, as if the very air in the room was trying to squeeze the life out of me. It wasn't a physical force. It was a conceptual one. In his new reality, I was a liability, a loose end, a line item on a balance sheet to be zeroed out. My vision started to tunnel, the magnificent view from his window dissolving into blackness. This was it. I had unlocked the ultimate prize, and my reward was to be erased by the monster I had unleashed. But as the pressure intensified, a thought bloomed in the darkness of my fading consciousness. He wasn't the only one who had been in the room. He wasn't the only one who had been bathed in that wave of knowledge. The language. I could still feel it, humming in the back of my skull, a dormant power waiting for a command. He had grasped the part of it that spoke of acquisition and control. But I had seen more. I had seen the schematics. I had seen the warnings. I had seen the fail-safes. Desperately, I focused on a single symbol I now understood perfectly. A symbol of negation. A command to unmake. I forced my mouth to work, my lungs burning for air, and whispered a single, alien word. The word I spoke felt like tearing something in my soul. It was a sound of absolute entropy, of a function being reversed. The crushing pressure around me didn't just stop. It vanished as if it had never been. Julian Croft staggered back, a look of shocked disbelief on his face. The incandescent light in his veins flickered, the symphony of global finance on the screen behind him dissolving into static. "What did you do?" he roared, his voice losing its godlike resonance, fraying into human panic. "The language isn't just a tool for creation, Mr. Croft," I gasped, leaning against the pedestal for support, my legs trembling. "It's also a tool for deconstruction. Every instruction has a corresponding undo command, a linguistic kill switch." The seed, now a dull, grey lump embedded in his palm, was visibly receding, drawing the light back out of his body. He clutched his hand, his expression twisting from rage to horror as the cosmic understanding, the feeling of absolute power, drained away from him like water from a shattered glass. He was being demoted from a god back to a mere mortal, and the withdrawal was agonizing. "No, no, you can't," he screamed, lunging for me. But the power was gone. He was just a man in a suit, again furious, wealthy, but utterly human. I sidestepped his clumsy attack, and he stumbled, crashing into the minimalist desk. "You wanted to own it all," I said, my voice steady now. "But you never bothered to read the terms and conditions. The creators of this technology, they weren't conquerors. They were librarians. The seed isn't a weapon. It's a key to a universal archive. It gives you access by amplifying what you are. For them, it amplified their curiosity, their desire to understand. For you, it amplified your greed. It turned you into a cancer, and the system has an immune response." I looked at my own hands. They felt different. I could feel the ghost of the language, a quiet resonance in my mind. The wave of knowledge hadn't just passed over me. A part of it had stayed. I hadn't touched the seed, so I wasn't corrupted by it, but the lexicon was now a part of me. I was a native speaker. Croft pushed himself up, his face pale and slick with sweat. The predatory smirk was gone, replaced by the desperate pleading look of a man who had glimpsed divinity and now found himself locked out of heaven. "Give it back," he pleaded. "The contract. You can have it all. The money, the buildings, everything. Just give me the power back." I shook my head slowly. "It was never about the money, Mr. Croft. Not for me. And it was never about power. It was about knowledge, understanding. You see an empire of assets. I see a library with a single, very selfish patron." I walked over to the wall-sized window, looking down at the city lights twinkling into life as evening fell. The world looked different now. I didn't just see buildings. I saw the complex systems holding them up. I didn't just see traffic. I saw the logic, the flow, the language of human civilization laid bare. The language of the box wasn't just about cosmic engineering. Its principles applied to everything. It was the ultimate Rosetta Stone, not just for ancient scripts, but for economics, physics, sociology, for reality itself. "The contract is void," I said, my back still to him, "because the entity you made the deal with no longer exists. Julian Croft, the billionaire, is gone. You're just a man who flew too close to the sun. The seed has been rendered inert. The box is gone. It's over." Behind me I heard a ragged sob. It was the sound of a hollow man, a man who had defined himself entirely by what he owned and who had just lost the one thing that could let him own everything. His footsteps shuffled towards the elevator, the sound of a defeated retreat. I didn't turn to watch him go. His story was finished. Mine was just beginning. I looked down at the city, at the sprawling, beautiful, chaotic system of humanity. I had $100 billion I didn't want, and a dead language in my head that was more alive than anything I had ever known. The research grants, the dusty archives, they seemed a lifetime away. I could solve the energy crisis. I could decipher the human genome like a child's primer. I could translate the songs of whales and the subtle chemical signals of the rainforest. The box was a test, and Julian Croft had failed. He had tried to become a king, but I had become a librarian. I had the key to the most important archive in the universe. I wasn't going to hoard it on the top floor of some glass tower. I was going to open the doors. I pulled my phone from my satchel, my fingers scrolling through contacts until I found the name of a former colleague, a brilliant but perpetually underfunded astrophysicist working on string theory. Her line rang twice before she picked up. "Eleanor," I said, a smile touching my lips for the first time that day. "It's Eris. I have something you're going to want to see, and you're not going to believe this, but I think I just figured out your dark matter problem.